The Legend of Jigong, Chapter 111.
So let's set the scene, because the premise establishes this paradox right away. We have the local prefect, Zhang Yun, arriving at the sprawling estate of Tian Guobin.
And just to clarify for the listener, Prefect Zhang Yun is essentially the mayor, the chief magistrate, and the chief of police all rolled into a single imperial appointment.
Yeah, a lot of power in one guy. But he's showing up to conduct a seemingly polite, highly formalized civic visit to Tian, who is this wealthy local elite.
But of course, it's a cover.
Right, it's a cover for a high-stakes sting operation. The problem is, they are entering a fortified compound. Usually, to get past outer defenses like that, you'd expect, I don't know, a diversion, a physical breach.
But a physical breach would trigger those exact political tripwires we just talked about.
The letter to the capital.
Exactly. Tian Guobin's estate is protected by this invisible shield of bureaucratic immunity. If the prefect arrives with armed constables demanding entry, Tian just denies them. He invokes his familial connection to the chancellor, and the operation dies right there at the front gate.
It's over before it starts.
Right. The text demonstrates that the only way to infiltrate a system designed to repel legal force is to use a vector that the system actively welcomes.
Which brings us to the servant leaning against the doorframe.
Yes, the Trojan horse.
Exactly. It's such a great Trojan horse analogy. So the prefect and Tian Guobin are in the main hall, and they're doing the whole exhaustive formality of classic civic deference. You know, lowering the sedan chair, apologizing for late greetings, the whole 9 yards.
Very rigid etiquette.
Right. But standing just behind the prefect is this servant who looks like he's on the verge of physical collapse. He closes his eyes and just slumps against the architecture.
And that performance, because it is a performance, targets a very specific vulnerability in Tian Guobin.
How so?
Well, Tian is a man who has violently forced his way into the upper echelons of society. And individuals who purchase or extort their way into elite status, they often overcompensate.
Oh, like new money trying to act like old money.
Exactly. They adhere rigidly to the performative aspects of aristocratic etiquette because they want to prove they belong. So when Tian sees a guest servant visibly struggling, the protocol of being this gracious, benevolent host dictates that he must offer respite.
He has to look like the good guy.
He has to.
So Tian points out the exhaustion and actively suggests the servant go rest in the inner garden. Which is just, I mean, the vulnerability isn't a physical flaw in the wall. It's the host's own desperate need to appear magnanimous.
Like a socially engineered buffer overflow.
I love that framing. By presenting a harmless, pitiful variable, the tired servant, the system's own programming, forces it to grant administrative access to the inner network. Because, spoiler alert, that servant is the eccentric monk Jigong in disguise.
And by having the master of the house explicitly direct him into the private grounds, Jigong secures absolute operational freedom.
Nobody's going to question him.
Right.
Yeah.
He doesn't have to evade the estate's security personnel. If anyone stops him, he is there by the direct order of Tian Guobin. The text even notes he simply opens his eyes and walks out.
So smooth.
The trap is laid using the target's own ego as the primary mechanism.
Okay, so let's follow him into that garden, because the architectural layout actually plays a massive role here, right?
It really does.
We're moving from this highly regulated, public-facing main hall into a space of private indulgence. The text describes warm pavilions, cool kiosks, and this prominent flower hall facing north.
And inside that flower hall is the initial target.
Right, Yunlong, who operates under the moniker the Qiankun Thief Mouse. And I really want to pause on that title for a second because Qiankun isn't just some colorful adjective they threw in.
No, not at all. Qiankun is a fundamental concept in traditional Chinese philosophy. It represents heaven and earth.
Basically the universe itself.
Exactly. So for a thief to adopt the title Qiankun Thief Mouse, he is declaring that the entire universe is his personal pantry.
Oh, wow. That is some serious ego.
It's a declaration of cosmic-level arrogance. He recognizes no terrestrial boundaries, no locked doors, and certainly no local magistrates. He genuinely believes he can steal from the heavens and the earth with total impunity.
But here is the fascinating contradiction. For a man who claims the universe as his domain, his current behavior in that flower hall is entirely restrictive.
He's trapped in his own head.
Right. He has a table of wine set before him, but he isn't drinking. He is consumed by this paralyzing anxiety because he knows Prefect Zhang has arrived unannounced at the front of the estate.
We are witnessing the physiological burden of unmitigated guilt. I mean, Hua Yunlong knows he is a hunted man.
Even inside the fortress.
Even inside.
Yeah.
Even with political shields. The sudden proximity of the state apparatus triggers a severe stress response. He's sitting there running complex risk assessments in his head, weighing the probability that the prefect is just there for a polite cup of tea versus the probability of an impending arrest.
Which makes his next move so wild, because if an operative is hiding from the authorities, the logical protocol is to minimize all external interactions, right?
Go to ground. Don't make a sound.
Exactly. But when Hua Yunlong sees the disguised Jigong walk past the flower hall, he doesn't shrink into the shadows. He leans out and actively initiates contact. He calls the servant over. Why on earth would he do that?
Because it illustrates how the need for operational intelligence can override fundamental survival instincts.
Okay, break that down for me.
Hua's psychological state is deteriorating because of the unknown variable, the prefect's intent. He cannot tolerate the informational void.
He needs to know what's happening out front.
Right. He calculates that intercepting a low-level servant might yield critical data, like how many guards are outside, are there constables hiding in the perimeter. He's trying to seize control of the narrative by gathering intel.
But that proactive urge is exactly what exposes his position.
Exactly.
Because when he calls out, Jigong just keeps walking. He offers zero verbal or physical acknowledgement. And Hua Yunlong's internal processing of that silence is incredibly revealing.
It really is.
He doesn't reassess the servant as a potential threat. Instead, he categorizes the lack of response as a physical defect. He just assumes, oh, the servant must be deaf or mute.
And that assumption is the fatal flaw of the highly successful criminal.
His ego gets in the way.
That Qiankun arrogance dictates that if someone ignores him, it must be due to their own inadequacy, not a tactical maneuver. He literally cannot conceive of reality where a low-status servant is actually a superior intelligence executing a silent approach.
So he just writes him off?
Yep. By writing off the servant as defective,
Yeah.
Hua drops his guard, abandons the interrogation, and retreats back into the pavilion, which allows the operative to close the final distance completely unchallenged.
And the distance closes, and the tactical posture shifts instantly. Jigong steps into the doorway, physically blocking the only exit, and drops the disguise using merely his voice.
Just his voice.
Just his voice. He announces, Hua Yunlong, you cannot run away this time. And the text describes Hua's reaction in these really visceral terms, like his soul essentially leaves his body. The physiological shock of the voice shatters his reality.
The auditory reveal is a calculated psychological strike. I mean, think about it. Who believed he was insulated by layers of security?
The estate walls, Tian's political power, his own isolation.
Right. All of it. So hearing this specific voice of his hunter inside his deepest sanctuary collapses all those perceived layers of security simultaneously. It induces a state of complete cognitive paralysis before any physical restraints are even applied.
But wait, here's the thing that gets me. Jigong possesses a body freezing spell, a literal localized suspension of physical movement.
It's magic.
Right. So the most efficient action would just be to paralyze Hua the second he steps in the door. Boom, done. Instead, Jigong engages in an interrogation, and the dialogue feels less like an arrest and more like a controlled demolition of the thief's identity. Why let the guy even have a moment to talk?
You have to analyze the mechanism of psychological dominance at play here. When Hua, who is operating out of sheer panic at this point, asks why he is being arrested, Jigong lists highly specific prior encounters.
Right, he brings up past escapes.
He references a hollow wall at a place called Majing's in Xiaoyu village, and an incident at Penglai Temple where a man named Lu Tong grabbed Hua's leg.
So, by citing those specific incidents, Jigong is retroactively altering the thief's memory of his own success.
Exactly.
Hua Yunlong survived those encounters, believing his speed and his Qiankun abilities allowed him to escape. But Jigong is injecting new data into those memories. He's demonstrating that those weren't escapes at all, they were calculated allowances.
He's revealing that Hua was under constant surveillance, that his freedom was merely a temporary permitted variable.
Wow. That is brutal.
It's analogous to stress testing a structural beam. You do not just snap it in half. You apply pressure until microfractures compromise the entire internal integrity.
So that when you finally apply the load, it shatters completely.
Right. Hua's entire sense of self is built on his identity as an elusive master thief. By proving that he was never actually elusive, Jigong strips him of his core competency.
And the structural degradation doesn't stop there. Jigong then feeds Hua a deliberate piece of misinformation.
This is a crucial move.
He states that Tian Golden, the master of the house, went to the prefect's office and explicitly instructed Jigong to come to the estate to make the arrest.
Which we know is entirely fabricated.
Completely fake. Tian is actively harboring the thief. So why say that?
The fabrication serves to sever the thief's final psychological tether, his reliance on the criminal network.
Because if his skills are useless, his backup plan is his alliance with Tian Gobin.
Exactly. By planting the idea that Tian brokered the arrest, Jigong isolates Hua in an absolute vacuum.
And the reaction is instantaneous. Hua violently curses Tian, calling him a beast with a human face. In a matter of seconds, the hunter has convinced the prey that his abilities are a fiction and his allies are his executioners.
He's broken.
Completely ruined. And only when Hua is reduced to a state of total isolation and psychological ruin does Jigong deploy the freezing spell.
The sequence confirms that the supernatural element, the magic, is merely the administrative lock on a cage that was constructed entirely out of psychological warfare. The mind was immobilized long before the body was frozen.
That's a great way to put it. So once the asset is secured, Jigong signals the perimeter team. Constables Chai Yuanlu and Du Zening enter the pavilion and apply the iron chains. But the extraction also yields physical evidence. Jigong searches the thief and recovers two highly specific items.
The loot.
The loot. A translucent white jade bracelet and a 13-string jeweled phoenix crown. And we need to talk about that crown.
Yes, the inventory of the recovered loot is critical for understanding the operational scale here. In the context of imperial sumptuary laws, a 13-string jeweled phoenix crown is not an item accessible to the general populace or even standard mercantile wealth.
It's not something you just buy at a high-end market.
Not at all. It is an artifact denoting extreme aristocratic or imperial proximity. It signifies that Hua Yunlong operates at the highest echelons of risk. He's targeting state-level assets.
Which means recovering those assets is a massive procedural victory.
Yeah.
However, the architecture of this narrative suggests that Hua Yunlong, despite his grand title and his high-value theft, is essentially a mid-level symptom of a much larger systemic disease.
He's just a guy hiding in a garden, really.
Right. To shift focus from the thief in the pavilion to the man who owns the pavilion, Tian Gobin.
Because the text introduces Tian Gobin's background to explain the mechanics of institutionalized corruption. Tian is not a generational aristocrat. He didn't inherit this estate.
No, he's operating under a newly laundered identity. Previously, he was known as the Mountain Pacifying Leopard.
What a name.
I know, right? He was a major operational leader in the bandit networks of Sichuan. And to really understand the weight of that, we have to look at the Lulin, or the Greenwood culture, in classic Chinese literature.
This wasn't just a handful of guys robbing carts on a dirt road.
Far from it.
The Greenwood was a parallel society. It had its own rigid hierarchical structures, its own laws of brotherhood, and its own economy based on organized extraction, banditry, extortion, and smuggling. A title like Mountain Pacifying Leopard indicates a man who commanded significant manpower and controlled vast territorial resources.
He was basically a warlord operating outside the imperial mandate.
Exactly.
But success in the Greenwood has a ceiling. The text notes that Tian and his core syndicate members, guys like Qiu Cheng, the Kite-Eye, and Yang King, the golden-winged eagle, they realized their enterprise had become too large.
They got too successful for their own good.
Exactly. They had accumulated immense wealth, but the sheer volume of their operational noise was inevitably going to trigger a massive federal-level military response. They feared a mass incrimination event.
It is the ultimate dilemma of the successful outlaw. You amass capital, but the capital is illegal, meaning you cannot interface with the legitimate economy without exposing yourself to the state apparatus.
You can't spend it freely.
Right, so Tian Gobin's solution is this masterstroke of money laundering. But instead of laundering currency, he launders his social status.
That's fascinating.
He liquidates his illicit assets, physically relocates his entire operation to Kwazhou, purchases a massive estate, and attempts to integrate into the local elite.
And the initial phase is pretty passive, right? He just lays low. But a syndicate boss does not possess the psychological architecture to remain passive indefinitely, especially when presented with an opportunity to secure permanent immunity.
And that opportunity arrives in the form of a visiting dignitary named Wang Xingxian.
Let's talk about Wang, because his arrival introduces the highest level of imperial politics into this provincial setting. Wang is the brother of Chancellor Qin.
And we really need to clarify the mechanism of power here. The chancellor acts as the central processor for the entire imperial bureaucracy.
He's the bottleneck.
Yes. All administrative reports, military deployments, and judicial appointments flow through the chancellor's office before reaching the emperor.
So access to the chancellor's brother is essentially backdoor access to the operating system of the empire.
Exactly. And Tian recognizes this immediately. But he also recognizes that traditional bribery like handing over chests of silver or rare antiquities is a volatile transaction.
Because it leaves a paper trail.
It leaves a paper trail, and it establishes a transactional dynamic, not a structural alliance. You're just a guy paying him off. Tian discovers that Wang Shengxian has a specific exploitable preference, though. Beautiful women.
Which leads to the execution of what the text refers to as a beauty and powder scheme. And the methodology Tian employs here is just devastatingly precise. He takes 3,000 silver taels and purchases a highly skilled singer named Yunlong.
We really must contextualize that financial figure for the listener. 3,000 silver taels.
This sounds like a lot.
It's an astronomical amount. In an agrarian imperial economy, an average family might require 20 to 30 taels to sustain themselves for an entire year.
Oh, wow. So 20 to 30 for a year, and he just drops 3,000 on one person.
3,000 taels represents the generational wealth of a small town, deployed as a single tactical expenditure.
That's insane.
It demonstrates the profound failure of the state's economic security up to this point. I mean, a fugitive warlord commands exponentially more liquid capital than the local government.
So he buys Yunlong. The expenditure secures the asset, but the deployment of the asset requires highly sophisticated social engineering. Tian doesn't just deliver Yunlong to Wang Shengxian's quarters.
No, because that would frame the transaction as prostitution.
Right, which carries low social status and provides no familial leverage. You don't become brothers-in-law over that. Instead, he orchestrates a theatrical deception within his own home.
He weaponizes the architectural and social privacy of the domestic space. It's so calculated. Tian instructs Yunlong to dress elegantly but plainly, devoid of heavy cosmetic preparation.
Make her look natural.
Right. Then he invites Wang to the estate for a private meal. The operational directive for Yunlong is to accidentally interrupt the gathering. She is to lift the curtains separating the inner chambers from the reception hall, feign shock at the presence of an outside guest, complain about the domestic staff failing to alert her, and quickly withdraw.
It's a completely manufactured vulnerability. And that accidental exposure, bypassing the formal introduction, creates an incredibly potent psychological effect on the target.
It does.
Wang Shengxian interprets the brief, informal glimpse of beauty not as a transaction, but as a genuine, intimate discovery. It triggers a possessive instinct. So when Wang demands to know her identity, Tian deploys the cover story.
And the cover story is brilliant. Tian frames Yunlong as his tragically widowed younger sister, currently residing under his protection.
That specific categorization is the linchpin of the entire operation, isn't it?
It absolutely is. By classifying her as a widow of respectable standing, he elevates her social viability. He positions himself not as a trafficker facilitating a vice, but as a concerned patriarch, seeking an honorable resolution for his grieving family member.
Oh, that is so manipulative, but it works. The framing allows Wang to pursue his desires without violating aristocratic proprietary structures. He utilizes his own servant as a broker to formally propose marriage. Tian accepts, the marriage is finalized, and the systemic integration is complete.
Tian Goban transitions from a wanted fugitive hiding from the law to the brother-in-law of the chancellor's brother.
The legal architecture of the empire is now officially inverted. The state apparatus, designed to hunt men like Tian, is now structurally obligated to protect him.
Which initiates the phase of the narrative that examines the hubris of the untouchable. Because when a criminal network merges with strict authority, the resulting entity is far more destructive than a standard bandit gang.
Because its violence is administratively sanctioned now. The text details the catastrophic local impact. Tian becomes a total tyrant. He manipulates property disputes, overrides local civil courts, and exercises supreme authority in Kuazu. And we see the precise administrative mechanism he uses to neutralize any legal pushback.
Right, when the previous prefect of Kuazu, who is described as a clean, honest official when he attempts to enforce the law against Tian's interests, Tian does not resort to physical violence.
He doesn't need to.
He doesn't. He utilizes his newly acquired political routing system. He dispatches a letter to his brother-in-law, Wang. Wang relays the grievance to Chancellor Qin. The chancellor drafts a memorial to the emperor citing administrative failures, and the honest prefect is legally stripped of his position and transferred out of the district.
It is a bureaucratic assassination. He eliminates the chief of police with a postage stamp.
It's chillingly efficient.
But systems of infinite leverage eventually encounter friction. And the current prefect, Zhang Yu, the man currently sitting in Tian's reception hall at the start of our story, he also becomes an obstacle. So Tian attempts the exact same administrative protocol. He requests Wang to have the chancellor remove Zhang Yu.
But this is where we see the limitations of the corruption network.
Pushback.
Right. Chancellor Qin, despite his immense power, operates within a rigid imperial bureaucracy that requires justification for its actions. Constantly rotating regional magistrates without documented cause degrades the integrity of the administrative system.
And it invites scrutiny from rival factions at court. Right.
Precisely. You can't just delete officials upon request without raising eyebrows. So the chancellor informs his brother that he requires actionable intelligence. He needs a documented crisis to justify an impeachment.
And that demand for a documented crisis pushes Tian Gobin into a state of operational overreach. He doesn't fabricate a financial discrepancy or bribe a witness for a perjury charge. That would be too simple.
Now he goes much darker.
He leverages his old Greenwood syndicate to manufacture a literal nightmare. He tasks his accomplice, Qiu Cheng, with acquiring and delivering a severed human head to Prefect Zhang's jurisdiction.
We must analyze the specific function of a severed head in the context of imperial law. It is not merely a terror tactic.
Okay, what is it then?
It is an administrative weapon designed to trigger the Qiu Cheng system, the magistrate's evaluation protocol.
Oh, because they're graded on crime solving.
Exactly. Imperial magistrates were strictly graded on their ability to solve capital crimes within a designated time frame. An unsolved homicide, particularly one involving a severed head without a corresponding body or identity, is a catastrophic administrative failure. It guarantees demotion, loss of rank, or exile for the presiding official.
The sheer logistical horror of that plot reveals the depth of Tian's detachment from reality. I mean, to acquire a severed head, the syndicate must have murdered an innocent citizen entirely at random, reducing a human life to a piece of bureaucratic sabotage.
It's completely sociopathic.
It demonstrates that his political immunity has completely eroded his sense of consequence. He believes he is a god operating the levers of the universe.
But that extreme hubris acts as a self-destruct mechanism. By deploying the severed head, Tian creates an existential threat for Prefect Zhang.
He forces the prefect into a corner.
Right. Passive compliance is no longer an option. The prefect must aggressively neutralize the threat to his own life and career. And that acts as the catalyst for incorporating the chaotic, asymmetrical force of Jigong into the local government's response. The system, pushed to the absolute brink.
And that theoretical conflict physically manifests right in Tian Gobin's reception hall. Where we started. Tian is sitting there believing he is the untouchable architect of the region, and then Jigong casually walks out of the inner estate, followed by two low-level constables parading Yunlong in heavy iron chains.
For Tian, this visual is a severe cognitive dissonance. It violates the fundamental laws of the reality he has constructed.
The brother-in-law of the chancellor does not have his private sanctuary breached by provincial police.
Exactly. The text notes he flies into a violent rage. He sheds the carefully maintained persona of a civic elite in an instant.
The veneer of the respectable patriarch just evaporates, and the mountain-pacifying leopard resurfaces. He and his syndicate commanders, Qiu Cheng and Yang King, immediately move to draw weapons.
They attempt to solve a legal breach with Greenwood violence.
But their tactical response is rendered completely obsolete by the nature of the operative they are facing. Physical violence requires momentum and proximity.
And Jigong disrupts the physical space.
Right. He deploys the localized freezing spell again, he points his finger, and the kinetic energy of the syndicate is instantly nullified. Tian Gobin, the untouchable oligarch, is immobilized mid-strike, reduced to a static object.
It's such a powerful image.
The constables apply the chains, and the extraction is completed. The prefect returns to his yamen, the central government compound that houses the courts, the administrative offices, the detention facilities. He hangs out the official board, signaling that the court is in session and accepting civil grievances. And what follows is basically an administrative cascade failure for the criminal syndicate.
The sociological response of the local populace is immediate and overwhelming.
Like a dam breaking.
Exactly. The text states that over 20 citizens arrive at the yamen to file formal legal actions against Tian Gobin.
Almost instantly.
Instantly. And the charges span the entire spectrum of systemic abuse. Illegal seizure of agricultural land, violent expropriation of property, kidnapping, and the manipulation of debt structures to ruin local families.
And we have to evaluate the timeline of those grievances. These 20 individuals didn't all suffer losses the day before. This represents months, perhaps years, of sustained, unaddressed trauma.
They possessed the data, they knew the identity of their abuser.
But the legal infrastructure was completely inaccessible to them.
The legal system in Quizhou functioned like a tripped circuit breaker.
Okay, I like this analogy.
The judicial power existed, but the political connection to Chancellor Qin acted as an absolute insulator. The citizens understood that filing a grievance against a state-sponsored entity would only result in violent retaliation. Their silence was a calculated survival mechanism in an environment of total sociological paralysis.
But Jigong's intervention bypasses the insulator.
Yes.
By utilizing a mechanism that operates entirely outside the imperial political structure, the magic, the body freezing spell, he removes the physical threat of the syndicate without needing authorization from the capital.
Because he couldn't get it anyway.
Right. The visual confirmation of the untouchable boss paraded through the streets in iron chains acts as a hard reset for the local grid. The insulator is shattered, and the current of justice is permitted to flow through the standard bureaucratic channels once again.
It is a profound commentary on the mechanics of systemic corruption. The text argues that when the internal hierarchy of a state apparatus becomes hopelessly gridlocked by elite protections, reform cannot be generated from within the compromised system.
It's impossible.
It requires an external, highly disruptive anomaly to neutralize the political shields so that the standard mechanisms of law can actually function.
So the primary node of the corruption network is neutralized, and the immediate legal processing begins. However, the ecosystem of the Greenwood does not operate on legal jurisdictions, does it?
Not at all.
Actions in the yamen generate severe reverberations in the outlaw networks operating in the shadows of the city, which transitions us to the ripple effect of the arrests.
Right, because while the municipal authorities are occupied with interrogations and administrative processing, the streets of Quizhou are flooded with the operational data of the raid.
The criminal underground is talked.
Word circulates rapidly through the underground channels that the monk from Lingyan Temple, Jigong, is responsible for the capture of Yunlong and the dismantling of Tiangobin's syndicate. And this intelligence reaches two highly specialized operatives residing in the city.
The text introduces us to two members of a larger coalition, known as the 36 Friends of Yushan. We have Yao Dianguang, operating under the call sign Cloud Chasing Swallow, and Lei Tianhua, known as the Meteor.
And the nomenclature within the Greenwood is highly functional. Titles like Swallow and Meteor denote operatives specializing in extreme velocity, stealth infiltration, and rapid kinetic strikes.
They're assassins, essentially.
Yes, assassins. But their primary motivation here is not financial. It is structural. They are sworn blood brothers of the captured thief, Yunlong.
We really need to analyze the mechanics of the Brotherhood Oath in this context. It's not just a casual friendship. Oh, hey, my buddy got arrested. Let's go help him.
No, it's far more binding than that.
In a society that operates outside the protections of imperial law, the sworn oath acts as the binding constitutional framework of the outlaw network, doesn't it?
Precisely. The oath demands absolute lethal loyalty. If a member of the network is compromised by the state, the remaining nodes are obligated by the laws of the Greenwood to execute a response.
It's mandatory.
Yao Dianguang explicitly outlines their tactical options. They must either orchestrate a highly complex extraction operation to breach the Yamen's detention facility, or they must locate the primary instigator, Jigong, and terminate him to balance the scales of vengeance.
And they opt for the latter. They deploy into the city at night to gather intelligence and locate the target. And the environmental conditions are optimal for their specific skill sets. Low visibility, urban density, shifting shadows. They are prowling the streets seeking an asymmetrical advantage.
And then the target presents himself in the most counterintuitive manner possible.
The scene construction here is just brilliant. The assassins are operating with maximum stealth, right? And they encounter Jigong walking down the street, supported by two attendants, exhibiting all the physiological markers of severe intoxication.
He is vocally broadcasting his identity and his recent operational success.
He is slurring his words, aggressively insisting to his attendants that he's not drunk, and loudly proclaiming, "I am the Jigong monk who caught Yunlong. If anyone has a problem with it, come face me right now."
It is a spectacular display of tactical vulnerability.
It's the deployment of human bait, and it utilizes a methodology that structurally mirrors the opening sequence of the entire narrative.
The sleepy servant.
Exactly. At the beginning of the operation, Jigong feigned physical exhaustion to bypass the static, heavily fortified defenses of a corrupt elite operating in broad daylight.
He used a socially engineered buffer overflow to get inside the walls. Yes. But now, the operational parameters have inverted. He has dismantled the institutionalized criminals. The remaining threats are asymmetrical, decentralized operatives who excel in the dark and strike without warning.
You can't just serve them a warrant.
No. You cannot locate a cloud-chasing swallow by knocking on a door or filing a piece of paper. You must induce them to attack.
So, by broadcasting his exact location, his identity, and a state of extreme physical impairment, he creates an irresistible gravitational pull for the assassins. He is dictating the terms of the engagement.
Instead of waiting for a blade in the dark while he sleeps, he is forcing the enemy to commit to a kinetic strike in the open street at a precise moment of his choosing.
He is maintaining complete control over the engagement timeline by projecting total loss of control.
When Yao Dianguang hears the broadcast, he perceives an optimally degraded target. He reaches for his weapon to initiate the strike. And the text leaves us at this exact moment of kinetic potential, the blade being drawn against the seemingly helpless monk.
What a cliffhanger to pause on.